For some people, the scariest thing is getting lost in space, and that's really scary. But even scarier than that is getting lost in the vastness of the oceans and seas. If you've seen the movie Life of Pi, you know how terrifying it can be to be lost at sea, and that totally fits with the topic of our video. So, stay with us till the end, where we'll tell you the incredible story of how a man survived being lost for 438 days at sea. The Pacific Ocean is incredibly huge, covering about a third of the Earth's surface, even bigger than all the land combined, except for a few islands. It's mostly empty, so if you ever got lost here, it's unlikely anyone would find you. That's what makes Jose Salvador Alvarenga's story of survival and rescue so fascinating. Alvarenga unintentionally holds a world record for surviving the longest time lost at sea. He spent an incredible 438 days in the Pacific Ocean, a record that's unlikely to be beaten anytime soon. But how did he do it? The answers start at the beginning of his journey in 2012. Alvarenga, a skilled fisherman from Mexico, embarked on November 17th with another man named Ezequiel Cordoba. They left from the little fishing village of Costa Azul on the Pacific coast of Mexico, aiming to work for only a 30-hour fishing trip. Their boat was really small and not ready for the tough situation ahead. It was basically like a canoe without any cover, just 7 meters long. They had a small motor to move it and only a fridge to keep their catch. Even though they knew a storm was coming, they went out because they could earn enough money in one day to live for a whole week. They left 120 kilometers from the coast to start working at 1 a.m., but they got caught in a storm, and it was really dangerous. They were afraid their boat would tip over, so they quickly cut their fishing lines and threw most of their stuff overboard. They tried their best to steer through the stormy night, aiming to get back to the coast by 7 a.m. Though they were 24 kilometers away and could even see mountains on the horizon, their luck took a turn for the worse when their motor failed. With no paddles, oars, or sails, they were at the mercy of unusually strong winds that pushed them back out to sea. Fortunately, their onboard radio still functioned, allowing them to report their position to their boss before their battery died. As their boat drifted farther into the huge Pacific, their boss sent out a search team, but the strong winds made it hard to find them. After only 5 days, they had to give up hope because their boat was now 450 kilometers away from the coast. They were all alone in the middle of the ocean, with little chance of being seen. They had no food left, so they had to catch tiny fish or birds with their hands just to survive. They started collecting rainwater in plastic bottles they found floating nearby to drink. But when there was no rain for a long time, they had to resort to drinking turtle blood or even their own urine to stay hydrated. Just imagine, day after day, month after month, stuck in a tiny space with only one other person to talk to. They could only fish or take naps for fun. It's no wonder someone might start to lose it in those conditions. According to Alvarenga, his friend Cordoba lost hope after about 4 months. He got sick from eating raw food and refused to eat anything. Eventually, he died, leaving Alvarenga all alone in the vast Pacific Ocean. Alvarenga was completely alone, with no one else around for miles. He was in the central Pacific, where not many ships pass by. Despite this, he says he saw a cargo ship during his journey. He waved at the crew, hoping for help, but they just kept going, ignoring him. Imagine how frustrating that must have been. Finally seeing a chance to be rescued after months of being all by yourself, only to be ignored. After 11 months at sea, Alvarenga had sailed roughly 8,000 kilometers in his tiny boat. His clothes were torn, and he only had a sweatshirt to protect himself from the sun. Then, on January 30th, 2014, he noticed coconuts floating nearby and birds landing on his boat, signaling that land was close. Drifting a bit more, he reached an empty island. He spent half a day near the shore before gathering the courage to swim to land. Knocking on a nearby house, he finally met other people for the first time since leaving Mexico 438 days earlier. His journey covered almost 11,000 kilometers, showing just how far he had traveled. Imagine setting out in a tiny boat from Lisbon in Portugal and slowly drift along at less than 1 mile per hour until you reach the shores of Oshima in Japan. But for Alvarenga, things took a different turn. Instead, he ended up washed ashore on the Aban Atoll, way down at the bottom of the Marshall Islands, one of the most remote places on Earth. If he had missed this spot, his next likely stop would have been the Philippines, about 5,000 kilometers away. Considering it took him 438 days to travel roughly 11,000 kilometers, it would have taken him another 240 days or more to reach the Philippines. Fortunately, he ended up on this small spot in the huge Pacific Ocean and was rescued. Later, he went back home to El Salvador and wrote a book about his experience. But then, he got sued by his friend's family, who thought he might have eaten him to survive. This shows that even if you survive being lost at sea for over a year, you might still face legal trouble. Thanks for staying with us.